Hey everybody, welcome back to A View from Earth, the official podcast of Fiske Planetarium here at CU Boulder. Hope everybody is doing well and staying safe. My name is Tara. I'm a planetary scientist and a CU alum, and also a presenter at the Planetarium and outreach coordinator and several other things, including hosting this podcast with my friend Colin. Hi, Colin.
Hey, Tara, and all listeners. My name is Colin. I'm an undergrad at CU. I study astrophysics and computer science, and I too work at the Planetarium as a presenter and co-host of this podcast.
Especially now that the Planetarium is open again.
Hooray!
Huzzah! We're super excited about that. So today we are talking with Mary Hanson, who is a CU student who also works as part of the Punch mission. We talked with Dr. Craig DeForest a couple weeks ago about being the PI and leading the Punch mission, but Mary is actually a project manager for a student-run and student-built instrument called STEAM that is part of the Punch mission. So she's sort of like she manages the students, but she's also a liaison between the student team and the Punch team. She's got a bunch of different stuff going on. So it was really fun to talk to her about her experience, as she also did a lot of engineering in school. She's still in school, but does a lot of like weather balloon stuff, and she's done some engineering, but also does the project management. So she's got a lot of different hats.
You're wearing a lot of hats. Absolutely.
Yeah. It was really fun to talk with her about all this different stuff.
Well, and I think it's kind of a cool perspective that we don't usually have on this show, because in the past, I think the bulk of the people that we've spoken with are, working researchers and scientists, followed closely by graduate students. But we haven't talked to that many, if any, undergraduates. And I think that it kind of, I always think about the difference between like having a lesson from a professor and a recitation with a TA or an LA. And there's always kind of a difference in feeling where, it's just like, whose shoes are you wearing right at that time? And right now, Mary is an undergrad. And so the feeling of the episode, it was kind of cool. Like you're really getting to talk to someone who's doing it right now. I think it'll be especially interesting for any other undergrads or upcoming undergrads to listen to her experiences firsthand as they happen.
For sure. And I think one of the things that we kind of touched on here in a minute is how like anybody can do this. Like being an undergrad and being involved in research and mission science and stuff like that is not terribly uncommon. Like it's a thing I did it, she's doing it, tons of people do it. There's tons of research, like undergrad research happening, especially at CU being a research institute. That's like their whole jam. They want you to do the undergrad research. So it's total, and so it was fun to talk to somebody else who was actually like doing it.
Well, and Space Grant is one pathway to, making this kind of undergrad research experience also a job in a way to pay for college or living or, make some money on the side. But CU is specifically, and I'm sure other colleges have similar things, has UROP, the Undergraduate Research Opportunities Program, which is a huge program that has a very significant budget for undergrads to get paid to do research. And so if you're a CU student listening to this, or maybe you're going to be, check out the UROP program and see maybe if that can apply to you, because like you said, Tara, I would say it even more than not terribly uncommon. I would call it quite common, in fact, for undergrads here to do research. I'll go that far.
Yeah, depending on the field that you're in. I know in astronomy, we had tons of people. I mean, the UROP grants let you do research over the summer, but then even just working at LASP or at GILA or at CASA or something. I mean, every year I spoke at a couple of the student research symposiums or something like that they call them. But every year they would have staff members come in, faculty, to say, hey, I'm hiring students. Come and work for me, please. Like they're asking for students to come and work there.
Yeah. Well, and it's always, like we talked with Craig, it's always good to have, that diverse set of backgrounds, which of course includes all sorts of factors. One of them being how much experience you've had. I think that people that haven't gone through and gotten their PhDs yet absolutely can provide insights or ideas that maybe have been kind of damped down and more experienced scientists.
Yeah, for sure. Having that yeah, sort of fresh perspective.
Mhm.
It's even, I think, as a early career scientist, there people are really excited about having early career people come in because they have those fresh perspectives. But even even early career scientists, people who have, you know, are just getting started also can have that same sort of, I don't know, I feel like we ask the dumb questions that they forget to ask. And so
Right.
that kind of, if nothing else, I've been in meetings before where I've been like, what about this? And you can see them like stop and the wheels start turning. It's like, huh,
Hmm.
huh.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And again, she mentioned too, one of the cool things about having students involved, especially in like NASA missions and things, is you get firsthand experience bringing up the next generation and making sure that they are well equipped. And because, you don't learn everything in school, there's all sorts of stuff that they don't teach you.
Yeah.
So to be there to talk to the younger people and kind of bring them up and be like, this is what you really need to know, kind of
Yeah.
thing. And then
Absolutely.
for things like, flagship level spacecraft missions that can go for 15 or 20 years, they need student aged people on that team because 20 years from now, they're going to be the mature, respected scientists in the field. You got to get them early.
Precisely. So what I'm hearing is any fifth graders out there that are listening to this that are thinking about doing science, start now.
Yeah,
Don't
totally.
wait. Ha. I don't know what that looks like quite exactly for someone that young to start doing some research.
There's all sorts of opportunities though. Like I know that the CU Women in Science and Engineering group does summer camps for girls that are for middle schoolers. So you can come and do
Okay.
like rocket camp and steam camp in the
Ah,
summers and stuff like that. There's all sorts of organizations that do things like that. I mean, we do outreach with a lot of places here in Colorado that are
really.
steam fests and, just different opportunities for even kids to get involved in this sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and uh, this is something that returned a lot in this episode in our conversation with Mary. Is if you aren't interested particularly in, say, math or physical science, if that's not what floats your boat, but maybe you're still like, oh, space is cool, there are so many jobs that, you don't have to have a background in math or physics to interact with the space science community. And we'll talk about that with Mary, so we don't have to, go
Yeah.
down that rabbit hole. But the point
I
being,
mean,
those
yeah,
jobs
I
exist.
mean, even Mary she's doing project management
Yep.
with space. At last, we have, a lady that does the newsletter, and that's
Right.
her thing. So like that requires zero math whatsoever.
Correct.
Like that's the way to do it.
I remember at Fiske even, we got that email a few weeks back from Brianna, the education manager at Fiske, about an artist who was wanting to help create some graphics that would aid in the education of space science. I imagine that this person, if I remember correctly, was not of particular scientific background, but was a visual artist, and that was hugely beneficial. It's an invaluable resource to
Yeah,
education. So really
absolutely.
anything.
Takes all kinds.
Cool. Well, what do you say we jump into the interview
Let's do
and
it.
hear from Mary herself?
All right. All right, so today we are talking with Mary Hanson, who is a CU student and project manager for the Student Thermal Energetic Activity Module, or STEAM, which is part of NASA's PUNCH mission, where she helps to explore and coordinate outreach opportunities between the STEAM team and the PUNCH outreach program. Her outreach experience includes giving presentations at Colorado high schools and middle schools about her experiences in engineering. Mary's also worked with the Colorado Space Grant Consortium since 2017 as a structural engineer and project manager. Thanks for being with us today, Mary.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Super stoked to ask you some of these questions. So to start off, tell us a little bit about how you got started with the Space Grant Consortium. That sounds super cool. And like, what are some of the projects that you've done with them?
Yeah, so my freshman year, I took a freshman projects class called Gateway to Space, which is one of the freshman projects classes through the engineering department that's aimed more towards aerospace engineering, but it's taught by Chris Kaler, who is the director of Space Grant. So in that class, we got to basically, in small groups, build and design an experiment that's going to go on a high altitude weather balloon. So that was kind of my first experience with Space Grant. And then in the spring, I applied to a project called HASP, which is the High Altitude Student Platform, which is similar to a weather balloon, except it's a lot larger, and it has a big platform of student experiments on it. So my project that I worked on was called Mira 2. So it was the second project that was on HASP from Space Grant. But the project was to design an inflatable pressurized contraption based on the Mira origami fold. And the purpose was to simulate a reusable inflatable habitat for space or planetary exploration. And then I was on another project that launched on the Space Grant Demo Sat, which is another high altitude balloon. And we looked at the ammonia production of E. coli in different stressful environments to kind of look at how E. coli and other bacteria reproduce in space.
So you've done like a lot of almost bioengineering kind of focused things. That's really cool.
Yeah, just a little bit. The habitat one was not necessarily, I mean, it's kind of bio, but we were more testing the like expansion and contraction and pressurization of the contraption, I guess.
So I'm thinking when you said that different stressful environments for E. coli, as I understand, is a bacteria.
Yes.
How do you make bacteria experience stress? What's an example of that?
Well, originally we applied for a research program through ASGSR, which puts a student experiment in microgravity. So our original experiment was to look at ammonia production of E. coli in microgravity. But because we didn't get the grant, we launched it on the weather balloon, which goes up to 800,000 feet about, and then the balloon bursts and then it falls back down. So there is a lot of different, like the launch environments, cold weather as it's going up, and then hot weather as it exits the atmosphere, and then the shock from the burst and then falling back down is kind of what we looked at. And we had ammonia sensors to measure like at different times, like what was the bacteria doing, because ammonia is a byproduct of the bacteria.
Sure.
That sounds super stressful to me.
I think I would be stressed, yeah. So Mary, it occurs to me that many of our listeners, perhaps if not all of them, may not be familiar with what Space Grant is. Could you just quickly brief us on what Space Grant is?
Yeah, Space Grant is actually a national program that gets funds from NASA to have college students work in on a project that could go to space, or it could be on a weather balloon, or it could go on a rocket. The CU Space Grant is kind of the main space grant in Colorado, but there are other space grants at mines and a lot of the community colleges, and yeah, there's really space grants all over, and it's just a way to get anyone involved in space projects. It doesn't just have to be engineering. We have a team on or at our space grant called Wearables, and they create a wearable electronic like device that measures, I think the one most recently measured cortisol in your sweat, so it could tell like how stressed you are based on like a bracelet that you're wearing. So they're not like all completely space related, but it's really cool projects that anyone from any major can get involved with.
Very cool. And so then from there, tell us how you got involved with the Punch mission, which for anyone that didn't listen to last week's episode, well, actually, Mary, I'll let you tell us what Punch is again briefly, and then also how you got involved with it.
Yeah, the Punch project is the polarimeter to unify the corona and heliosphere, and it is an official NASA mission. We just got approved to move on to phase C, which is building and integrating and testing. So we're all really excited about that. But it's a 4-satellite constellation to study the sun and the corona, which is the outermost layer of the sun that we can't see. And STEAM is the student module on that will be measuring X-rays of solar flares. But I got involved in Punch in the fall of 2019, right after my DemoSat project ended in the summer. I was looking at other projects that I could apply to, and it just seemed really cool. I didn't really like have any like anyone be like, oh, you should join this project. I just thought it sounded cool, so I applied, and that's how I got involved.
Respectable. And was that as simple as filling out an online application, or did you like write someone personally? How did that work?
No, I applied through the Space Grant website. It's super easy to just go on there, and there's a Boulder Students tab where you can look at all the positions for lots of different projects and apply. And it's super easy, and the interview process is really easy. And yeah, there's not a ton of projects right now, but I know in the fall they're going to be starting some new ones.
That's super cool. Just, hey, I want to be on a NASA mission. Let me go fill out an application. It's not normally how we do it. That's awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
So for Punch, you're the project manager of a team of 12 students. So you've got a whole team that you're sort of managing. And you said that they're building an instrument. What are these students? What sort of roles are they playing with Punch?
Yeah, right now we actually have 18 students. The original proposal for STEAM was only having 12, but we found that we needed more people to kind of be able to get the job done. So the students that I work with, their majority are undergrads. We have one grad student right now, but they are the ones who are doing all of the electronics and all of the testing. And we're using some off-the-shelf X-ray spectrometers, but we are building the whole box that they're housed in and the electronic system that sends power and data to the spectrometers. And so we have a structures team that is building the box, and an avionics team that's doing all of the electronics and data and coding. And then we have a science team who is going to be doing the testing of the spectrometers with different X-ray sources. And our science team also does a lot of presentations for different conferences. We have a conference coming up next week, which is the Punch Science Meeting that our science team is going to be presenting at. They are going to present at the AGU conference, or they're submitting an abstract to hopefully present at the AGU conference in December. We've presented at the Solar Physics Division conferences. So it's not just you get to build a thing and put it in space, but you also get to do a lot of talking with people and talking to really cool scientists who have actual jobs doing this stuff. And I think that's really neat part of getting to work at Space Grant and with the Punch team.
How high stakes are these undergraduate involvement tasks? I remember talking to Kevin France, who was detailing graduate students working on, I think the stakes were something around the neighborhood of like $8 million if one of the grad students did something wrong. Is it a similar situation or is it less stressful?
I don't think our budget is quite $8 million. I think, I'm trying to remember. I think it's around $2 million. But our instrument is a do no harm instrument. So if anything were to happen to us, we won't affect any of the punch spacecraft or instruments. It would just, be a bummer for us, but none of the rest of the science will get damaged. So, obviously we want our instrument to work, but it's not the end of the whole mission, which I think helps us not feel as stressed as we probably could be if our instrument was a critical instrument.
That seems maybe like a more conducive environment to education and learning than
Yes.
to constantly be afraid that you could screw up this whole NASA mission.
Yes.
So you as the project manager, what is it that you do and how do you interact between the two teams?
Yeah, as project manager, I get to do a lot of scheduling and budget tracking and leading meetings. But we have a lot of mentors from Southwest who come to weekly meetings with us and help us with a lot of our questions and issues that we have. So it's not like we're completely on our own, but my main job is to kind of coordinate the meetings, and I keep track of what our schedule is, and I send schedule updates to the punch scheduler to make sure that we are on track to finish on time. I also give updates to the systems engineers at Punch that they present to NASA monthly, and just kind of make sure that my team is keeping on track and we're not doing anything that we're not supposed to be doing.
Always good. So how did you get from engineering and building things to go on balloons and now doing project management? That's it's a little bit of a jump.
Yeah, I was the structural engineer for Mura 2. That was my first project, but for the DemoSat project, me and one other person were made project manager together. And I still kind of worked with the structures team on that project a little bit, but it wasn't anything as complicated as doing scheduling and budgeting. And we had a budget, but it was like $500, not $2 million. So and the schedule was a lot shorter term. We did the whole thing from spring semester to the end of the summer. So it was about 8 months total, whereas this project is 3+ years. So it's a lot more difficult, I would say now, but I really I enjoy my job. So I don't really know where the jump came in, but I'm glad I got the opportunity to do it.
For sure. And I imagine having that engineering background is helpful when you're managing a team of engineers, essentially.
Yeah. I'm actually doing a engineering management minor through the engineering department. And so I started the minor after I was project manager for my first project, and I was like, well, I might as well actually learn how to do my job. So I started taking the classes, and I found they're really helpful with learning what all of the different aspects of project management are. I most recently took an economics class, which helped a little bit with budgeting, but it was more about down the road. I took a project management class, which I thought was pretty helpful. But yeah, I think that as an engineer, it is helpful to lead other engineers because you kind of know how they think. But I don't just have engineers on my team. We have some physics and astrophysics students on our science team. So it's I mean, they're not any like it's no different than leading engineers. It's just like finding different tasks for people to do.
Which in itself requires a bit of know-how and a bit of project management skills.
Yeah.
I'm curious, Mary, and this is kind of a big question, so if you don't have an answer for it, that's okay. But you came into CU, apparently with the intent of learning some engineering, because that's what you're majoring in. And now you've got this managerial experience on a couple different fronts, and it's kind of increased in responsibility. Do you see yourself staying in that realm, or as like a future career path? Or after having kind of a foot in both pools, are you maybe, I don't know, like where are you at with this? Do you think this has shaped where you're headed in life?
I think so. I enjoy being in charge, which it sounds bad, but I like being able to kind of see all of the different things that everyone is doing, which you can get as an engineer, but you don't necessarily work with other teams as closely.
Right.
So I do enjoy that part of my job. I definitely could see myself going into some sort of management role in the future, but I also like building things. So that's why I was on the structural engineering team for a couple projects. But yeah, I don't really know what I'm going to be doing in the future. I haven't really figured that out yet. So
No, that's fine. I was just curious, having that experience is very cool. So obviously getting to work on an actual NASA mission, as we mentioned, is invaluable experience for students like yourself and the others who are involved. But I'm curious about the flip side. What are some of the benefits for the punch team to having students like yourself and the people that you are kind of delegating work on the mission?
yeah, I had to actually ask one of my mentors about this question today because I wasn't really sure how to answer this. But he had two things. One is that NASA really encourages student engagement in different missions and giving opportunities to students. And being able to do that means that these engineers who are already working get to train the next kind of wave of engineers coming into the field, or scientists, or not just engineers, because we also work with scientists and astrophysicists. But we are kind of the next people who are going to be getting jobs in this field. So you get to train them, and it's a benefit to not just the punch team, but to NASA and all these other aerospace or science companies that will be hiring people in the future, because we kind of already know how things work. And then the other benefit to punch science is that STEAM will be measuring the flares and active regions of the sun, while punch is measuring the effects of the flares and the active regions coming out of the sun. And so STEAM can kind of provide context to where these phenomena are coming from that punch is observing. So that was kind of the two things that
So that
benefit
is to
punch.
say that punch and STEAM are not necessarily intertwined. Is that the correct understanding?
No, not necessarily. Punch is going to be measuring more the solar wind and what happens after these energized particles leave the sun, whereas STEAM is measuring where the energized particles are coming from. So they benefit each other, but they're not dependent on each other, if that makes sense.
Got it. That makes sense. And the two missions are distinct. They're not, one isn't like a sub part of the other. They're two separate entities, or is that incorrect?
STEAM was proposed in the punch proposal. So STEAM is like dependent on punch for money and mentorship. But there have been other X-ray spectrometer satellites that have studied the sun. So STEAM isn't the first one, it's just in addition to Punch.
What does this mentorship sort of look like for these students and the scientists and people that they're working with?
So we have the 3 Southwest people who come to our meetings every week. We have the spacecraft systems engineer, Matt Beasley, and one of the spacecraft engineers, Will Wells, and they are really into the, are we fitting into our mass budget? Are we fitting into our volume? And then we have a science mentor, Amir Caspi, who helps our science team with writing analysis code and coming up with, doing stuff with our presentations. And we probably meet with Amir multiple 3 or 4 times a week. And then we meet with other engineers as needed. We've met with some of the people from the thermal team to make sure that our thermal stuff is keeping us in the right temperature. And we've met with some of the spacecraft team and some electrical engineers from Southwest to just kind of help us with some things that we might not be sure about or things that aren't covered in classes. Because a lot of this is pretty technical stuff that doesn't always get covered in undergrad classes. So our mentors are all like invaluable to us because we definitely wouldn't be able to do any of this without them.
For sure. And I have found that same thing in research. There's so much that they don't teach you in class that you need someone to explain. So I imagine they do as mentors. They don't just kind of give you the technical advice you need, but also sort of, I don't want to say like life and career advice, but they do kind of help keep you on track as far as like, hey, you want to be a scientist? Here are the things you need to know in the real world.
Yeah, we've actually our mentor Amir got some of our science members who graduated some interviews over the summer. So they're definitely people that I want to stay in contact with for potential job opportunities or anything like that.
It sounds to me like you're doing a lot of weekly, and you were describing your kind of schedule, that there's a lot going on. As a student right now, how do you view your involvement with, through Space Grant with Punch? Is it like a full-time job, or is it more of a, I don't want to say hobby, that feels like it demeans it, but something that you kind of view as your education and less so as a job? And how does that fit into your classes and everything as you're kind of going through college?
It kind of depends on the time of year. In the summer, I'm working full time on STEAM, so it is my job. But over the school year, I work less hours so I can focus on school. And one of the things about Space Grant is they're really like school forward, and your school comes first before your projects, because your project is just a project and your school is, what's gonna get you a job. Like, yes, your experience will help, but school should come first. Like, I definitely picture STEAM as a job and work on it as it is my job. But some other students on my team have other internships over the summer, so they don't do as much. So I'd say it kind of depends on the student, but I do picture it as something that I want to do in the future. So I think of it as my job.
I think that's a good way to look at it. So we talked with Craig yesterday a little bit. It'll be last week when this airs, but we talked to him yesterday about outreach with Punch and sort of his philosophy on outreach and why they do the things that they do. But how does outreach fit in with the STEAM team, and what's sort of the outlook there?
For STEAM, part of it is getting students to join the team in the future or join Space Grant and other projects. But I also think outreach is super important. So and I'm talking about like high schoolers, middle schoolers, that sort of thing. They know that this is something that they can do for a job. It's not something crazy like, oh, only really smart people get to work at NASA. I mean, yes, but that's not the only thing you can do. You can be a scientist and still work on NASA missions. You can, go and study physics and still work on a NASA mission. There's another project at Space Grant that has a communications team. So they have communications majors and they can still work on a NASA mission. So it's not just for the STEAM mission, but outreach is super important so people can know that whatever they choose to do, they can still work in the space industry. But for STEAM, I think it's really important to kind of get more people involved and interested about things that we have in our own solar system that people might not know all of the details about.
For sure. And like I worked on a couple of missions when I was an undergrad, and I think it was really invaluable I love talking to like high school and middle school students to tell them the same things. Like I work on one of the big flagship missions. And so we have like a mission photographer and a videographer and graphic designers who make all of our stickers and like all sorts of stuff like that. We need all sorts of people on NASA missions, not just scientists and engineers.
Yeah.
Which I think is pretty awesome. So say we do have any students out there who may be graphics designers or what have you, but just in general, people that are high school or college students that want to get involved in sort of mission science, do you have any advice for them or suggestions on how they could do that?
Be on the lookout for anything that might interest you and apply to it. Even if you think that, oh, I don't really have the right experience, I don't know if I should apply, just apply to it no matter what. And you might get rejected, but if you can talk about what you're passionate about, and people really like that, or not maybe, they definitely like being able to know that someone's passionate about something rather than, oh, you just got a 4.0 and didn't really do anything else. So I would say like figure out what you're passionate about and then look for any opportunity that you can find and just apply to it. And I know if you're going to a school that has a space grant at it, there's so many different projects. They're not all, satellites. We have rockets, weather balloons, doing something with the wearable electronics. We have so many different things. So even if the project that I'm talking about might not sound super interesting, there might be one that is better. So I would just look into different programs and apply to as many things as you can.
And that seems to be, kind of a tip that is applicable both in and outside of the realm of science. You can do science with kind of any background and any skill set, but if you're interested in things that are, outside of that, the realm of what we think of as science and space too, if you're into art or music or history, it seems like, that's always true to think about what you're interested in and try and follow those. We briefly talked earlier, Mary, about how this influences your future and your career and stuff. And I know that was kind of a large question, but right now, I mean, you are expected, according to your resume that I have, to graduate in 2022, so next spring.
Yes.
Do you know? Yes, congratulations.
Thank you.
Karen's clapping. What do you know? If you have any plans, from some immediate plans from after you graduate, do you know kind of what you're looking towards, or is that up in the air?
Oh gosh, I really don't know. I would love to continue working on science instruments and satellites. I've found through STEAM that this is what I'm interested most about being an aerospace engineer. I think
Sure.
rockets are cool, but I've found that I really enjoy this.
Sure.
So I'm hoping to find a job in that field. I know that some of the punch people have said that after STEAM people graduate that they might be able to find jobs. I would love to continue working on punch if that is an opportunity for me. But I don't really have any specific plans.
Got it. Hey, and that's a-okay. I was just curious if there was something that you were really saying, hey, this is what comes next for me, which is interesting. It's probably a idea that I should break, because so many of my peers in astrophysics, it's kind of like saying, oh, well, middle school comes after elementary school and high school comes after middle school, and then your undergrad and then your graduate degree. And then it's a very, classic path that isn't for everyone, I think. I'm seeing, oh, Tara, you've unmuted.
Oh, that was just something that I just thought of randomly, because Colin and I both come from the science side, but from engineering, is that in science, you do your undergrad and then you go to grad school, and that's just how it works if you want to, especially do something like mission science. But is that the case with engineering? Do a lot of people go straight into grad school, or do you see more people that are going into industry or things like that?
I think it's pretty split. I know, so I'm taking a 5th year. So I would have graduated this past May, but due to classes and stuff, I'm taking an extra year. But a lot of my classmates that graduated this past May went to grad school, but a lot of them found other jobs. So it's not necessary. I think if you find a program that specializes in what you're interested in, you should go for it. I think I would want to do grad school eventually, but I need a break from school after this. So that's why I'm planning on finding a job. But it's definitely not a path that everyone takes, unlike you were saying that like in sciences that is the path to find a job, is you need a graduate degree, and I've heard that from some of my coworkers too. So I think it is pretty split in engineering.
Well, and something that I've kind of started hearing a lot about too, as I start to think about what I'll do after my undergrad, is that a lot of companies will sponsor, if you end up in industry with whatever degree you have from undergrad, will sponsor a master's or sometimes even a doctoral program, in the name of, hey, maybe you'll stick with our company and then you will be even better at what you do. And so it's kind of this, you get to go to grad school for free type deal, or less than you would out of pocket. So I don't know, that just felt like relevant information that I have.
Yeah, that's kind of like what my plan is. I didn't want
Sure.
to say you need to pay for my college in a couple years, but that's kind of what my plan is to
Sure.
take a break from school, work, and then hopefully whatever company I end up at will pay for my master's degree, but if not, I'll just pay for it myself.
Huh. I'm seeing on your, I'm looking at the STEAM website, namely the team tab here, Mary, that your favorite hobbies are indoor gardening and hanging out with your gecko, which are both things that I have not seen in most people's lists of favorite hobbies. And so I'll ask one question quickly. How is indoor gardening, is it specifically distinct from outdoor gardening? It seems interesting that you emphasized that it was indoor and not just gardening in general.
Well, yeah, I live in a rental house, so gardening is a little, you don't really have that great of yards and stuff when you live in rental houses, especially in neighborhoods that is majority students, and rental houses in Boulder aren't the greatest. So I do a lot of, I have a lot of plants, but I just have them inside because yeah, it's not super easy to do gardening and stuff outside when you don't like you're not living in a place for very long, and the yards frankly aren't in great condition at all. So
what tips do you have for fellow rental unit college going students that may also like to garden but only have the indoors to do it?
Find plants that can deal with the light conditions of being inside. I know that, being in Colorado, it's sunny for the most part in the summer, but obviously you might not have windows that like get full sun. So find plants that are partial sun or mostly shade, or, kind of things like that don't mind not getting a lot of sun.
I think the whole time I was in Boulder, I tried to grow like 3 plants and all of them died for that exact reason. Like I killed a cactus because it just wasn't getting enough sun. It was pretty miserable.
Yeah, it's hard to find, because a lot of the places like floral flower shops are like, oh, succulents. They're so easy to take care of, but they need so much sun. So you need to find plants that don't need as much sun as succulents, I would say.
For a graduation gift from high school, my mother gave me a philodendron, also known as a golden pothos, which is a kind of ivy that can survive anywhere and through anything. So if you're listening and you're thinking, what kind of plant can I find? Go to your local plant store and find a philodendron. And you can't kill it, because if you could have, mine would be dead. But it's not.
Yeah, I have a couple of philodendrons. So
There you go. There you go. Cool. Well, I think that that just about brings us to our time. Mary, thanks so much for talking to us and giving us this hour of your time this evening to tell us about your experience as a student manager with STEAM and Punch.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All righty, and that just about wraps things up for this episode of A View from Earth, the official podcast of the Fiske Planetarium. We'd like to extend our gratitude to Mary again for giving us her time this evening. Well, for us, it's the evening, to talk about her involvement with Punch and STEAM as the student team manager. Hey, check back in next week. We're going to be talking with someone named Paul Taylor, who is of many, many different specialties, but specifically we're going to talk about indigenous astronomy, namely that of the Aboriginal people of Australia. And so there's a lot of cool stories to tell and to listen to there. Of course, you can always find the details on our website, colorado.edu/Fiske. And you, as I said, you can find details to episodes. You can send us your questions so that we can pass them on to our experts. And if you're feeling generous, you can make a monetary donation to this podcast. If it's important to you, you can keep it going, and we really appreciate it. This podcast is available on YouTube, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.